Okay, I'm just setting up the live stream, so please bear with me. Okay, let's have a look at the weather at Stansted, and then we'll have a talk about what we're doing today. So, is the weather still favouring runway 4? Yeah, just about. Or 04, I should say. Okay, so somebody sent me a nice email a couple of days ago. I'll just check the volume before we start talking endlessly. So yes, somebody sent me a nice email a couple of days ago asking if I might run through a complete flight in the 737, the PMDG 737-800 in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So that's exactly what we're going to do tonight. And I'm going to fly it from Stansted in London over to Dublin in Ireland. So it's about an hour flight in the air, so we'll do some stuff on the ground first. And they specifically asked if I could program the aircraft by hand, and also if I could really explain what we're doing when we configure for ILS and use the ILS to land. So I'm going to try to explain as much as I can about both starting the airplane up, operating it, and landing it. So as we're going through doing everything, I'm going to program the aircraft by hand, and we'll see how we get on. So yes, anyway, although I'm not going to actually use Simbrief to program the airplane, I'm going to go and show it as well, just to show how you can program flights into Simbrief. So before we get to Simbrief, I'm going to show you LittleNavMap first. So I've sketched the route into LittleNavMap. So I'm going to start again and do it over again, so you see me do this as well. So I've got rid of my route, so there's nothing programmed in here now in LittleNavMap, but you can see there's a little yellow airplane on the map that illustrates where it is in the simulator. Okay, so we're leaving London Stansted. We can right click on London Stansted and we can say set that as our departure. So set airport London Stansted EGSS as departure. So I've done that, and the yellow line appears, and it appears in the flight plan over on the side of LittleNavMap. And then we can go and say, well, we're going to go and fly to Dublin, so we'll go and zoom in on Dublin, right click on Dublin, and set Dublin International EIDW as the destination. Okay, so that's done that. So now we've got a rubber band across the map from where we're flying from and where we're flying to. So then we zoom in on Stansted, and we need to discover how we're going to leave Stansted. So the first thing we're going to do is hover the mouse over Stansted. This is one way of doing it, it's the easy way. And this dialog pops up when you're hovering over the airport icon in the centre of the airport. And at the top of the screen there you can see the NOAA Station METAR. So that's the meteorological report for Stansted. And if you read along it, it says EGSS, then it gives you the time, then it says auto, and then it says 100.07 kT. That means 100 degrees, 7 knots. That's the wind at ground level. Okay, so if you think about it, 100 degrees is about here somewhere at 7 knots, so that favours taking off on runway 4 to ensure that you have wind on the nose of the aircraft. So then we're going to right click on Stansted, and we're going to say show us the departure procedures for London Stansted. And now we can go and pick the standard instrument departure we want to fly out of Stansted on. So we're going to pick one from SID 04. So, and you know, these are the runway 04 departures. So we can go and highlight them, and you can have a look at them on the map and see what they look like. So I think BKY2S is probably good for us. So we'll insert that into the flight plan. So we right click on it and insert it. Okay. At the other end of the route, so we'll just drag the map along until we get to Dublin. we can right click on Dublin, and we can actually, before we do that, let's just highlight Dublin and see which way the wind is. So can you see it says NOAA station METAR, EIDW, then the time, and it's in Zulu time. And you've got 26006 KT, that's the wind at ground level. So 260 degrees, 6 knots, so the wind is coming from the west. So that means the wind is coming this way across the airport, so it will favour landing on either runway 28 left or, is it 28 right? Yeah, it's over there, it's not drawn properly. But we're going to land on runway 28 left. Okay, so if we then right click, actually let's zoom out first because we want to be able to see what the standard terminal arrival looks like. So right click on Dublin, show the arrival approach procedures, and it brings them all up for Dublin. So we want 28 left, remember. So we want to look to begin with at the stars for 28 left. So there's one of them. There's another one, and another one, and we can just keep going through them until we find one that looks good for our flight. See, when you do this in Simbrief, it does all this for you, but this gives us an element of design to do it the way we want. That looks like a good one for us. So Boeing 4L is the name of that star, and if we drop it down, we can see there's only the one option there. So we right click on it and we insert it. Now it's asking which runway we want to use, so we said 28 left, okay? So the next thing we're going to do, so that was the arrival route. We want to now do the approach, which is the final bit into the runway. So if we zoom in, we want to do the ILS into runway 28 left, and you can see it says there's 3 transitions. So that means 3 extra bits beyond the approach that hook up to other waypoints. So if we drop that down, you can see there's one for Dub, one for Obinu, and that Obinu matches our star. So if we highlight that, it superimposes it onto the map. And that's the one we want, so we'll right click on it and insert it. So we've now got the beginning of the route and the end of the route. So we can just make up something in the middle that broadly makes sense. So we might go and insert the Wallasey VOR here. So we'll add that to the route. We'll add the Trent VOR to the route. So I'm just right clicking on the waypoints. And we can see we haven't got another VOR, so let's go and have a look out in the countryside over here. There's a fix over here, or there's another one here called Sivda. If we right click on Sivda, we can add Sivda to our flight plan. And that's probably good enough. Okay, so we can take that, and in the true spirit of doing things earlier, I'm just going to go back and go. I'll redo what I did earlier. So I can go to the flight plan. Having saved, I've got it in LittleNavMap. I've sketched out what I want, but I need to get this into Simbrief. An easy way to do that is to go into the flight plan menu in LittleNavMap and copy the flight plan route description to the clipboard. So I'll do that. Then I'm going to open Notepad, and we're going to delete what's in here. And I'm going to press Ctrl and V to paste it. Now we can delete this bit. This is all this is saying is about the average speed and the altitude to fly at. We can get rid of that because we'll cover that later. So we're departing Stansted. We're doing the BKY2S standard instrument departure. Then we're going to Sivda, TNT, Wallasey. Then we're doing the Boeing 4L standard terminal arrival route into Dublin. So that hasn't got everything, remember. It hasn't got the transition, for example, on the approach. So we need to remember that. So we can go over to Navigraph now, and we could do a new flight. So this is just showing you how to shortcut doing that same thing in Navigraph now. If we click on the pencil at the top corner of Navigraph, we can paste and press enter. And it's got the basics of that route, but it's got some things missing that weren't in the text description, like the runway to use. So we'll go and fill in the missing bits. So runway 04, add to route. And the runway we were coming into Dublin was 28 left, wasn't it? Add to route. And the approach we were going to use was ILS runway 28 left, and the Obinu transition, so we'll add that to the route. So now we've got exactly the same thing in Navigraph. Okay. Obviously the huge advantage Navigraph gives us over LittleNavMap is not only can we see the route, we can go and see the actual chart, the departure chart, for example, or at the other end we can see what this looks like on the real chart for that arrival into Dublin, and the ILS chart as well. Okay, so we've got that into both Navigraph and into LittleNavMap. So I've shown you how to program that in both cases. We're now going to go into Simbrief and do the same again, but we're going to cheat slightly. So we're going into the dispatch system in Simbrief, and we'll create a new flight, and we'll say where we are, what our airline is. So I'll just say virtual flight, and 001 is me. Depart from EGSS, which is Stansted, and then EIDW, which is Dublin. Select our aircraft type. We want the B738 for the Boeing 737-800. There it is. So it's worked its own route out. We don't want to do the route, it says. So what we can do is scroll down. Actually, before we scroll down, we'll say our altitude. We want to fly at 28,000 feet. For our cruise, and then for our actual route we'll go and paste in what we had earlier, so we can take off the airfields off the end. It doesn't matter, you can leave them in and it will take no notice of it. So then if we go, we have to make sure we're using the same runways, so 04 and 28 left, and analyze the route, and it said the route is valid. Yep, so we've got the same route there in Simbrief, and we can generate the route, and that will make us the whole operational flight plan. We're not actually going to use it, but I'm just showing you that you can do this. Okay, so we can say goodbye to Simbrief now. The only reason I'm doing that is so we can use the tablet in the aeroplane, and I can show you that as well. And we can minimize that, we can minimize that, we can minimize that. If you are running Volanta, and we can go and run Volanta in the background. So Volanta is a really nice electronic logbook that can record your flights. So you can see it's seen this aeroplane, N738BW. I haven't got a picture of it, so let's go and upload a picture of the aeroplane. So we'll use that one. So then in the future, when I use this specific aeroplane in the simulator, it will have this all ready to go. So I'm going to put VFA 0001. Flight number, I can do the same again, it really doesn't matter. And then it's asking here about where we're flying from and to, so we can add a flight plan. Now we can either import from Simbrief directly, or we can enter that text route. So that would be cheating, wouldn't it, using Simbrief? So I'll just show you the text route method as well. So that same string of characters that describe the route we can use in here. So if we save that route, and there it is, it's drawn it on here as well. Let's go and tidy this up so it hasn't got the satellite map so you can actually see it. So it's got the same basic route, but it doesn't draw the SID and star very accurately. And if we leave that running, that will actually record our progress while we're flying. Okay, so we're finally going to go and jump inside the aeroplane and run through the startup checklist and program the same flight into the aeroplane by hand. First thing we do is go overhead and we turn the batteries on. So battery switch is up here in the middle, and we cover it over. Then we go down to the FMC, and I'm going to press the menu button. And you can see there's a PMDG setup menu and there's FS actions. We want to go to FS actions. Then go to ground services and request that ground power is connected to the aeroplane. And it says connecting. If you go and look outside, you will see that little cart has appeared, and then a cable will appear. There it goes. The cable's just appeared into the aeroplane. And that will say release when it's actually connected. As soon as that's connected, we can press Control 7 to go overhead. I'm following a checklist, by the way. You can download it. I've put a link in the notes of this video. As soon as that's done, we can turn the dome light on if we need to. We don't need to. It's bright sunshine today. And we can go and turn the inertial navigation system to nav on both systems. So you switch it to nav on both left and right, and it will end up saying align after a few seconds. Okay, then you can move this to heading status over here, and I've got it set to instant alignment, so it's going to say 0. If you didn't have it on instant alignment, you see a number of minutes would pop up with how long it's going to take to align the inertial navigation system. Now, this is important. You can hear that buzzing. That's because I'm busy talking, and the batteries are discharging on the airplane while I'm busy talking. So we're going to come back down, and we're going to turn the ground power to on. Notice the alarm has now gone off. So the alarm was warning us that the batteries were being used up. Okay, so we can now go and arm the emergency lights and cover those over. We can go to the window heats and turn those on. Turn the probe heats on as well. And now we can come down to the FMC. So Control 3 brings us down to the FMC, and we can go and configure our flight. So we press the menu button. Then we go to, oh, it's saying enter IRS. This is important. So we go to the FMC. Notice it keeps saying it. So the bottom line of the FMC serves as both your entry point to type things in and for messages from the system to tell you things. So to get rid of those messages so you can see what you've typed, you need to press clear. So it was asking us to enter the IRS position. So the first page you see is information about the database, so the navigation database. So it shows you which set of AirAct data you're using. So we want to go to position initialization. So there's a basic rule on the, or not a rule, a convention on the 737s that the bottom right key of the FMC takes you to the next thing you need to do generally. So we're going to go to pos init. So we press that. And you can see some fields that we can fill in have got hyphens, they are optional. Other fields have got squares, meaning they are mandatory. So to fill in the IRS position, you'll notice we are on page 1 of 3. We can go next page, and this shows us the data for the GPS systems on board. So we can pick up one of these locations. If we click on it, it puts that value into the scratch pad. We can type in the scratch pad as well, look. And if we press the clear button, it will remove what we've typed. So by selecting something, you're really just copying it into the scratch pad. The trick with the scratch pad is it stays there between pages. So if we go previous page, we can now put what we've typed into the scratch pad into any field just by selecting the key next to the field. So we've got this location and we can drop it on the IRS position and it disappears because it's got it now. So which airfield are we leaving? Stansted. So EGSS is the ICAO code for Stansted, and we'll drop that in. We don't need to put a gate in, and then we can go to route. So remember what I said? The bottom right key typically says the next thing to do. So I'm going to click on route. Oh, the sim has frozen. Hang on a second. It does this at the most inopportune moments, doesn't it? Just give it a second. There we go. So, route. So now we're going to key in the origin and destination of our route. Notice it has carried over the reference airport in the scratch pad for us automatically. So that's a bit of a time saver there. So we can just press origin and it will put it in for us. We can now see where we're going, or say where we're going. EIDW is the ICAO code for Dublin. And we can put in the runway we are leaving Stansted. So we said 04, didn't we? Okay, we're not going to do a flight plan request. That's Simbrief. Okay, so we're going to leave that as it is. So we've put the basic route in, but notice there's 2 pages. If you go to the next page, you can put airways and intersections in. We're not going to use any airways today. Okay, so we're just going to go straight to the legs page. In fact, we don't need to do that. We'll do departure and arrival first. It'll make more sense in terms of explaining it to you. So we go to departure and arrival. If we say we're going to depart from EGSS, remember it already knows we're departing from EGSS. It already knows we're on runway 04, but we just need to choose the SID. So the SID was, or the standard instrument departure was BKY2S. So if you look on the list, it's right at the top, look. So then we can go onto the index again. So we filled in the standard instrument departure. We can go back to the index so we can fill in the arrival into Dublin. So remember we were going to say it was 28 left, wasn't it? But the Boeing 4L standard terminal arrival route. So next, ILS 28 left. Boeing 4L, and remember it was Obinu. If we go and look at the chart, Obinu was the waypoint that we wanted to connect the two pieces together with. So we're going to go for the Obinu transition. Okay, so notice now we can go to route. So if we go route, and we can activate what we've done so far. So if we say activate, and suddenly the execute button appears, we can press execute. And if we go and have a look in the legs page now, it's got all of the pieces of the standard instrument departure. You can go next page and previous page, and then it's got the standard terminal arrival route already programmed in. And then it's got a discontinuity, so the aeroplane's not going to figure out how to get from the SID to the star all on its own. So we're going to have to put our intermediate waypoints in. So let's go and have a look at those. We wanted to go via Sivda, TNT and Wallasey. So Sivda, S-I-V-D-A, drop that on there. Then TNT, which is the Trent VOR. Notice that there are multiple Trents. I know from experience the one we want is the one at 53 degrees north, so that's that one. And then we want WAL for Wallasey. WAL. We'll just check that is the correct code. Yes, it is. Look, you can see it there. And then, now this is interesting. This will illustrate something quite nice. We need to get rid of this discontinuity. So we can go next page. We can select Boeing. Then we can go previous page. This is good that it's over a page, so you get to see this. And then we select the discontinuity, and what it will do is pull Boeing up to put it there. Yeah? I notice this is saying this is the modified route we're working on. We haven't actually said we want to keep it yet. So as soon as we execute it, all of our changes will become the active route. Yeah? Okay, the other thing we haven't done is set up the initialization data for the weight of the aircraft and the performance data. So if we go into init.ref, that takes us to this page. We want to climb to 28,000 feet, so we can put 280. Oh, we've got an extra key in there. We can put 280. So you can either type in flight levels or the height, and the aircraft will understand it. If you type in 280, it will say FL 280, and that means basically in hundreds of feet. So 280 times 100 feet is 28,000, obviously. So if you do that, you can see it says FL 280. That gets into the reason you have flight levels is you're talking about transition altitudes all of a sudden. I'm not going to talk about that today, but just understand that flight levels are feet times 100. So 0 fuel weight, the 737 will calculate it for you. So you just select it. It will put it in the scratch pad. Select again. Now before we go any further, I haven't set the fuel up. Let's go and have a look. So we go to the menu, and we can go to FS Actions, and we can go to the fuel section. So we've got 54% fuel. That would be plenty to get to Dublin. So we don't need to worry about it. But if you did want to fuel the aircraft with whatever you wanted, you can. So then we'll come back to init.ref and let's fill in the rest then. So we did 0 fuel weight. We'll say we'll have 1 ton of reserves. If you had an operational flight plan, you can obviously read this from the fuel plan on the operational flight plan. And cost index, we're just going to say 100. Cost index will appear at the top right of your operational flight plan. It will be called CI normally. If you want to know what it is, it's a formula that governs how aggressively the aircraft can accelerate or climb. So it's how much fuel it can burn, basically. Okay, so we can execute those changes. Then we can, remember, bottom right takes us to the next thing, so N1 limit. If we come through, it's got that data, but let's go back a second. So we're on page 1 of 2. Let's go to the next page and have a look, see what's in here. So this is performance limits. You can monkey with them. We're not going to. So N1 limit. We can leave that as it is. And the next page is going to be the takeoff parameters. So we can put in the takeoff flaps. So we'll put in 5 degrees. And that will suggest the rotation speeds for the aircraft. So all we need to do is click the soft key next to each one to confirm it. Okay. And then there's a center of gravity. So we can select it. It will calculate the center of gravity for us and put it in. And that will suggest a trim setting for the aircraft. So when you accelerate down the runway, the aircraft will be pre-trimmed so it doesn't lift the nose or push the nose into the floor. So the aircraft will be in equilibrium at rotation speed. So it wants trim of 5.12. We have to do that ourselves in the 737. So we come back to the pilot view and look down, and we can rotate the trim wheel to put this on 5.12. So we're going to hold the mouse button down and just spin it round, and you'll watch that small needle moving. That's probably about there, isn't it? Okay. So, where are we? Control 3 brings us back here. So we're pretty much done. We've done the performance data. We've done the legs. And we've done the departure and arrival. Okay, so we are done with the flight plan. If you want to check this, what you can do is put the navigation display into plan mode. And it will center on your aeroplane. Or it will center on a waypoint with a CTR marker against the waypoint that will correspond with the navigation display. Okay? So then a key, when you're in plan mode, the bottom right soft key on the FMC will say step. So if we click it, it will step through the flight plan. So it's centering. So D099G now is in the middle. Yeah? And you can step, 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 step. And now if you want to zoom out, you can. So you can see then we're going out to Sivda, so step, then over to TNT, Wallasey, Boeing, and then we're into that crazy looking standard terminal arrival route that loops back on itself and comes into Dublin. So you can just do what's called a gross check of your flight plan to make sure it all looks okay. When you're happy with it, you can just go back to map mode. If you press the legs button, it will go straight to the top of the legs page. And then you can put your zoom back to what you want for departure. So you probably want 10 miles to make things neat and tidy so you can actually see what's going on down here. Notice we have got a master caution showing up. That's fine. We can go and cancel that for the moment. If you listen to the professional pilots, they will tell you you ought to clear the warning at every step whenever it comes on, because then you learn what is causing it to switch on, if that makes sense. And during the startup of the aircraft, you will be expecting it to switch on at various points. Okay, so we've programmed the flight plan. The next thing we do is go to the MCP, or Master Control Panel. So that's this panel up here that controls the autopilot. So first thing we need to do is go and turn the flight directors on. So there's one on each side, and you'll see FD comes up on the primary flight display. So the flight directors are the system that informs the auto. So there's two systems in play in the big jets. There's the flight directors, or the navigation system, and then there's the autopilot. So the autopilot actually controls the aeroplane, but the flight director tells it what to do to achieve the flight plan. So the flight director gives you a crosshair when you're normally in flight, and you'll see that appear a bit later on. So it'll be telling you what to do. Okay, prepare for flight. So we need to go and put our cruise altitude in. So we can go and put in 28,000 feet. If you were doing a real flight, you would have an initially cleared altitude you would be given by the tower, but we're going to go straight for our cruise altitude to keep this simple. You will go and set your heading to the runway direction as a safeguard. So I think it's at 44 degrees at Stansted, I think. Let's go and double check. As long as it's in the ballpark, it'll be fine. 42 degrees, sorry. And we need to go and set the target airspeed for the auto throttle. So we're going to spin. Whoa, we don't want to go that fast. Notice that's a good point, actually, that I've done that. Notice it's flashing an 8 in front of it. That means that's unachievable. Okay, so we'll set it for 200, it'll be fine. Okay, we can also set the course to the heading. And notice it's got a course on both sides. It won't really make any difference to us because we'll be using the GPS. But if you did need to fall back and start doing navigation using radios, then it would already be pointing the same direction you are. In the real planes, they'd keep them aligned with the direction you're going all the time. Unless you are doing radio navigation, in which case it comes into play. So, we can pre-select, because we've got an operational flight plan, because we've got all the legs programmed in, we've got no discontinuities, and we've got the flight directors on, we should be able to pre-select. Oh, and the ADIS, sorry, not ADIS, the what's it called in the 737? Just the nav IRS system. That's it, inertial reference system. So because the IRS system has aligned, we should be able to pre-select lateral navigation. Let me just line us back up on this so while we're doing this. So control 1 was it? Yeah. So we should be able to pre-select lateral navigation, which is going to steer the aircraft when the autopilot's on. And we also should be able to pre-select vertical navigation, which is going to manage the climb rate of the aircraft once we're in flight. So once we take off, the two things we'll have to do essentially is go and turn the autopilot on and turn the auto throttle on. Yeah, so we'll do the auto throttle when we're on the runway, but we'll also, once we're a few hundred feet off the ground, we'll go and turn the autopilot on, and these modes will kick in, and the aeroplane will start following the flight plan all on its own. Okay. So next thing we need to do is go and configure the barometric pressure on the altimeters. We can shortcut that in the sim by pressing B on the keyboard. If you watch what happens. So that's aligned all of the altimeters to be tuned in to the same barometric pressure, so 30.09 inches in this case on the ground at Stansted right now. And then, okay, we're into the normal checklist again now, so we're away from the systems. So overhead. Go and turn the seatbelt sign on. I'm going to have to try and remember where everything is now. So seatbelts are in the middle, isn't it? So we're going to put it to auto, and we're going to go and put the chimes to on as well. We can go and turn the yaw damper to on. We can go and set the cabin pressure to the cruise altitude. So we need to set this to the same altitude we'll be cruising at. So the environmental control system knows what to do, basically. Okay, so aft fuel pump number 1 needs to come on, so that's right over here. So we are turning on a fuel pump for the APU to use, the auxiliary power unit. And we can now start the APU. So there's a switch down here. So if you look from the pilot's eye view, this control is just here. So what we're going to do is flick this down to start, and then it will come back on its own, and you'll see that exhaust gas temperature needle moved there. That's the exhaust gas temperature of the APU, or auxiliary power unit. So in the back of the 737, whoops, let me get the view round here. There's the exhaust. Oh, I'm trying to get it lined up for you. That's the exhaust of the auxiliary power unit. So there's a small jet engine, there it goes, in the tail. And that provides electrical power and compressed air to spin up the main engines. So you can hear that happening. If you look down in the cockpit, that exhaust gas temperature will have shot up to about 7 and it'll fall down to 4. Now, unlike the more modern aircraft that have automated systems, you have to transfer the wiring of where the electricity is coming from in the aircraft. So you can see now APU gen off bus has lit up. What that really means is we can use the APU, but it's not been chosen. So what we can do is flick these two switches down, and then the left and right side of the aircraft will both use the APU. Once we have done that, we are not using ground power anymore. So the blue lights come on ground power saying it's available, but we're not using it. So we can flick this back just to show you it. If I switch this on, it will come on and APU will light up. If we flick these, we're now using the APU. Okay? So the next thing we can do then is go back into the flight management computer, because hidden in here is where we can go into ground services and we can ask them to remove the ground power cart from the aeroplane. Okay, so it says disconnecting while they're doing it. And if we wait for a moment, it will say connect again, I guess. Just give it a moment for that to happen. There we go. Oh, it says request, which means it's not connected anymore. And we can remove the chocks. If we look outside, removing the chocks is a trigger for the simulator for the door to close and the truck to be pulled away from the aeroplane. So you'll see him slowly reverse away now and get out of our way. There he goes. Okay, so overhead, having done that, we can go and turn all the fuel pumps on, getting ready to start the engines basically. And we can turn the APU bleed to on. So APU bleed is rerouting the compressed air being generated by the APU away from the environmental control system to spin the engines up. Okay? So at this point, in the real world, you push back. So again, we've got a warning pop up, we get rid of it. Press Shift P. Now we need to release the parking brake. Is it on? No, it isn't. If it's vertical, it's on. I'll just show you that. So if I hold the brakes on, I can lift it. If I hold the toe brakes on again, it will come down on its own. You just have to hold the toe brakes on for 3 seconds. So we're just waiting for the tractor to start pushing us backwards. I'm not going to attempt to start the engines while we're pushing back, but in the real world they do, because there's 2 pilots on board and they've got enough hands to do that. And they're not trying to talk to you about it while they're doing it. Okay, so we're being pushed back. Notice we haven't put the taxi lights on or anything yet, because otherwise you would blind the ground crew. Okay, so we've probably got enough room to turn around there, haven't we? Well, there are other aeroplanes around now, so we'll hang on. This is the updated Stansted, by the way, that got updated with the recent UK World Update. It's not quite as detailed as the InniBuilds one, but it's still pretty good. So press Shift and P, which will stop the truck. And I need to go and put that parking brake back on now, so I'll hold the toe brakes on and lift it, and that will stay on. Okay, so engine start, here we go. Overhead, we're going to set the ignition system. Actually, I'm going to do this from lower down because it's easier to see, because I'm going to need to look around quickly to show you things. So we're going to set the ignition system to the right ignition system and then go GRD, and if we look down you will see, here we go, N2 has started to increase. So that's the speed of the axle inside the turbine. And when it gets to 25% of its nominal 100% speed, we can advance the fuel control lever or start lever. So 25%, there we go. Advance the starter. and then you will see the exhaust gas temperature rise and the fan speed start to increase, and the fuel flow obviously as well. You will also notice that this switch that's on GRD at the moment will go back to off all on its own. So if we keep an eye on it, it will just flick back. Okay. So then we can, now there are two ignition systems. It doesn't matter which you use. They tend to alternate them in real life, apparently, to save wear and tear, so one doesn't get used all the time. So we're going to start the second engine with, or the first engine number 1 I should say. So we flicked it to GRD overhead and the N2 is coming up. And we're waiting for 25% on the N2, so the axle speed basically, and then the fuel control lever or start lever is advanced. And you can see the fuel flow is increasing, exhaust gas temperature is increasing, and the turbofan speed is increasing. Okay, so there's something I missed out when we turned the fuel pumps on that's showing up now. Look, it says config in the middle. What that means is when I turned the pumps on, I didn't turn them all on. And that was kind of on purpose, so we would be able to see that. So I didn't turn on the center, so you've got the left tanks, the right tanks, and the center tanks. If I go and turn those on, the low pressure sign will go away in a moment. And that warning will have gone away. Okay, so it's a really common thing you see people do. And I did it on purpose. I actually got a sticky note here to remind me to do it to do it wrong. Anyway, so that was that. So next thing we can do, the engines are running. That means the engines can actually generate power now. So if we go overhead and we have a look, those blue lights have come up now on the engines. So the outer two switches on the bus transfer mean we can actually get power from the engines instead of the APU. So if we go and flick down the outer two switches, they take over. The APU is now running but not being used. So we can go and turn off the APU bleed, and we can turn off the APU. Okay. The next thing you can do after that is go and put the hydraulic pumps on. So they're here, so all of them need to go down, and the lights will go out. And also turn on the packs. So these are the environmental control system basically. So using the compressed air being generated by the engines to pressurize the cabin. And the heat obviously as well from the engines is going to be used for that. Okay, so taxi lights can go to on. Finally. So we'll come off the parking brake, so hold the toe brakes on, remember, and it will fall forwards all on its own. And notice we have some positive thrust immediately. So we're going to immediately turn right. And on the way to the runway, as soon as we get to a taxiway, I'm going to go and put the flaps out. Because we're doing runway 04, we've got quite a long taxi anyway. So this would be a good point, I guess, to turn the head tracking on so we can see if we're clear of things. So we just go out to the taxiway. Yeah, so the 737 will quite happily taxi along on idle thrust. So we've got a warning down here. Speed brakes do not arm. Let's go and have a look at that just to make sure. I've got a control configuration problem. So it's worth looking out for the warning lights, because if you do have controls that play up sometimes, and I do, that can happen. So we also need to put the flaps in takeoff position. So we said 5 degrees, didn't we, earlier? And there we go. Okay, let's continue with our taxi. So there are 2 taxiways at Stansted, Alpha and Beta. Or Bravo, I should say. Phonetic alphabet, not Greek alphabet. So I think this is the Bravo taxiway. We'll check on the chart in a moment. But we'll go over to the other one in a moment. So if we can have a look. We're going along... Actually, this diagram is wrong, isn't it? I haven't reloaded it in the simulator, of course. So if I go and look on Navigraph, we can pull up the airport diagram. Oh, actually, no, this is labelled differently. That's interesting. It's labelled very differently. Anyway. So, seeing as we're going right to the far end. Have a look around, see what's in while we're taxiing down. So the other thing we need to do is go and set the brakes to rejected takeoff, and it just says they're armed. That's the light that came on above them. So all that does is pressurizes the brake cylinders, so if you did need to put the brakes on in a hurry, they're going to be ready to, to go to 100%. There's a small laundry list of bits and pieces to do just before we take off. When we've lined up on the runway, we need to go and put the strobe lights on, or the position lights as they're called on the panel in the 737. I'll show you them in a moment, and the landing lights. So we've got the gear lever again. When this sim paused earlier, the gear lever flicked up on its own. I didn't do that because I've actually disconnected the gear. So that was a flight sim glitch that caused that. I was just looking around there, looking to see if there are any lights that were still on, and I noticed the red ones over there on the landing gear. So yeah, it's something to be aware of if flight sim glitches. Sometimes the controls can throw into strange places, and that was the opposite of where it should have been, which is quite an amusing one, really. Okay, we're not going to need any more runway than that, so let's go and pull ourselves out onto the runway. Obviously, in the real world, you would stop at the holding point. So we're going to do a bit of a zigzag here to get back onto the closer taxiway to the runway here at Stansted, and then turn again. So when you see the professional pilots doing the checklists, they'll have a pre-takeoff checklist, and that will go through the basic positions of the primary controls. So they will catch things like levers being out of position. Okay, so we'll get lined up and then we'll do the last few bits and pieces to get the airplane ready. So, landing lights can come on. And the position lights can go to strobe and steady now. And the auto throttle can come on. Now, in the real aeroplane, there is a... I'm just checking, I just saw something out the corner of my eye there. There's a button under here that does takeoff throttle automatically for you. I'm going to manually control the throttle because I want to show you something. So you can see our flight plan is there in front of us, so you want to check the settings of the navigation display as well, just to make sure you've got what you want. We haven't got TCAS on yet, so that's another thing we can go do. So I'm just going to turn head tracking off to go do that, otherwise we'll be fishing around for it. So on this version, it depends on this one, it's in the middle, but depending on the loadout of the aircraft of which exact airframe you've got, and it can change on the 737s, this may be in a different place. So we'll put this onto TARA and we'll press the TFC button, which will put the range rings on the navigation display, and it shows you a dotted line around the aeroplane. If anything comes within that circle, we'll get an alarm. And the TARA, basically TA means traffic advisory, which means it's going to tell you that there's stuff nearby. The RA means that you're going to, or the automated flight systems are going to react to those other aircraft. Okay? I can't remember off the top of my head what the RA actually stands for, but there we go. Anyway, so brakes are off, just checking around, final check. Open the throttles. So I'm going to use manual throttle, remember, and I'm doing it on purpose because you can run the throttles over 100%. That's why I'm doing it. So then I'm going to pull it back to just under 100% by hand.
8 knots.
If you run them at over 100% and you leave them there, you will kill the engines. So no more than 3 degrees a second on the rotation.
Positive rate of climb.
And then about 15 degrees. Then gear up. Then you're watching the speed and your direction. Autopilot can come on. And then you're controlling the flaps basically. We haven't got VNAV, so I'm going to go and switch it on. And it's lowering the nose. So it's targeting 230 knots. That will be due to the legs page. If you look at the restrictions, yeah, it's going for 250 and 3,000 feet initially. That's interesting actually, it's going higher than 3,000. Oh, yeah, above 3,000. It's aiming for 5,000 and 250 knots for these legs along here. Okay. So the next thing we'll need to think about, if you go and look at the departure chart. So we got, yeah, this 5,000 feet restriction was here. Look for this. You can't, you have to stay below 5,000 at Barkway, 5,000 at Barkway, 5,000 at Barkway, and then you're off on your way. So the other thing we need to pay attention to though is the transition altitude. So once we get past Barkway, we'll be looking at the transition altitude. So coming up to 5,000, the plane should level out. And you can see it's slowly doing that. And vertical speed's tailing off, look, and it's hit 5,000 feet. That's all working. Once the gear is up and locked in, you can put the lever back in the middle. It saves pressurizing the cylinders the whole time, so it kind of disables the system. Let's have a look from outside. We've got a few moments to enjoy watching the aeroplane. Those wings are wobbling around, aren't they? Okay. So if we go and have a look at the map, just so you get an idea of where we are and where we're going. Let's look at LittleNavMap just to see some differences there. So obviously Navigraph draws the route a little bit more neatly. That's interesting. Yeah, so there's the Barkway VOR, but we've still got restrictions. 7 miles from the Barkway VOR. Okay, so that's what D7 means. So we need to be still at 5,000 feet. And if you read the notes, it will tell you all about any restrictions on the plates. The reason you get such complicated routes around London is it's very, very busy airspace. There's lots of airports. So the very, very tangled routes through the sky to go both in and out of the Greater London area. So we're off on our way to Dublin. We can increase the range now on this. You can see there's Sivda coming. Okay, so it's climbing. And notice that's interesting. It's actually put itself above 250 knots. So it accelerated before it really got the nose up. So it's breaking the speed limit at the moment. So we're about to come through 6,000 feet, which is the transition altitude. So at that point we go for standard barometric pressure. I think it's synchronized. That's an option in the FMC, in the PMDG Boeings. In the real world, they're obviously not synchronized. You have to do it on both sides. The controls are mirrored, pilot and co-pilot, and it will be called out that they're doing it, and they match each other's actions. We can go and turn that auto brake off. So let's just check around. The flaps are up. The brakes haven't appeared in the wrong position this time. And we're off on our way. We're about to come up through 10,000 feet in a moment, at which point we'll turn the landing lights off. So civil aviation, below 10,000 feet you run with the landing lights on. Above 10,000 feet you turn them off. Going upstairs at quite the rate, aren't we? So again, we're still using VNav. We could play around with level change and things like that, but I think it'd be interesting to see what profile it follows to get to 28,000, to be honest. So we've gone through 10,000 feet now. Landing lights off. So yeah, I'm not going to pretend that I'm doing absolutely everything that the real crews will do. but I'm just showing you the basics of operating the aeroplane really, and trying to explain what we're doing and why along the way. There's so much functionality in these aeroplanes. You can see, you know, there's so many things you can play with and fiddle with and program. So if we increase the range now on the navigation display, you can see there's the TNT VOR and then the Halsey VOR. I'm not sure if, I think terrain still inop in the, it comes on, but yeah, you would imagine terrain might have shown the coastline. You get the green banana, which is quite cool. So that shows you your projected point on your route that you're going to reach top of climb, or you're going to reach your target altitude. Okay, I can have a sip of coffee now. Am I on my way for a cool Guinness, is being asked in the live stream chat. Well, do you know, I've never been to Dublin. I've been to Ireland a couple of times, but I've never been to Dublin. So yeah, it's going to probably be a holiday at some point, because it's only a couple of hours away by air to go and visit. Well, you can see from this, an hour away. Obviously, I think it takes longer to get to the airport than it does for the flight. So, especially these days, because you have to arrive 2 hours before, don't you? Okay, so let's go and have a little look at our route. So we're on our way to Dublin. Busy climbing. You can see the same thing in LittleNavMap, and we can get rid of that view. You can see the whole route there, look. So you can see our little aeroplane moving along. Something that's quite nice in LittleNavMap is you can also see a profile mode. So I downloaded off the internet, somebody had made a performance file for a 737-800. So I thought it might be interesting to see, they've made it quite conservative, haven't they? Because I think we're going to get to top of climb much more quickly than they said. But they may have been basing that on a much lower cost index, which would have reduced the climb rate substantially. So Demo Mute is saying Dublin is nice, they make Guinness in a unique way. Well, Guinness is Guinness, that's just the water's different in Ireland, isn't it? So I think beer, the taste of beer is influenced enormously by the water. So obviously a different water supply is going to change it. I think I'm right in saying though, is it not made in Ireland anymore? I thought the Guinness factory, the original Guinness factory, is just a museum now, isn't it? I may be wrong about that. Yeah, so just looking at live stream chat about the comments about this, I think I'm probably right. Are those, so looking at that though, maybe they've taken an average, because vertical navigation puts like a parabolic curve on it, doesn't it? So we might come back through here and not hit top of climb until halfway between Trent and Wallasey. Obviously if we go for a level change, all bets are off and it will just go for maximum climb. Although saying that, look, we're running at 97% N1, 94% N2. So we're not far off maximum thrust. Right. Something else we can do way ahead of time is go and program the ILS in for Dublin. So if we come down and look down here, in LittleNavMap you see these green feathers. So these are the ILS localizer and glide slope markers. And you see the frequency and the course to program into your aeroplane. If you look at on the real chart, if we go and have a look at the approach chart over on Navigraph, you get a feather drawn in, which isn't quite as good, but you get a very, very clear course and frequency, and you get a diagram of the altitude to come into the ILS at. So the trick here to notice here is they're coming in level, so they're meeting the ILS from underneath. If you're using approach mode will not engage if you are above the beam. Yeah, you have to come in from underneath it for it to engage and start tracking the glide slope. So that's why they typically show this to come in from underneath the glide slope. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Let's just close that down for the moment. Can we pull that back and have it not rotated? There we go. So 278 degrees and 111.35. So down in the cockpit, we want 111.35, and we'll transfer that to active. That's on nav 1, and then 111.35. We'll transfer that to active, and then we'll set the course to match this. So this is the runway direction, 278 degrees. Okay, so the major issue I'm going to have with landing this is I very rarely fly the 737s, and I don't know off the top of my head what the flap limits are. My word, the auto throttle's running it very close to maximum speed, isn't it? Usually you give yourself 10 or 20 knots margin. But yeah, so on approach I will be guesstimating flap deployment, because I don't know the 737 well enough. And the interesting thing, and I was talking to somebody about this just last week, they were saying they were having difficulty with the 737, and the bigger 737s, the problem gets worse and worse. That the, how would you put this, the flight envelope when you've got the flaps out is very narrow. When you, because your maximum speed and your minimum speed become closer and closer together as you slow down and as you deploy the flaps, and you'll see that later. So on the indicated airspeed ribbon, you'll see the maximum and the minimum will close up on each other. So it's almost like threading a needle, bringing the aeroplane in. And the bigger the 737, the worse the problem becomes. Because if you look at them, same wings on all the 737s, but the body gets bigger and heavier on each of the successively bigger models. So you've got the same amount of lift for a heavier fuselage, which means you've got less of a window then to operate the aeroplane within. Finer margins. So someone's saying look below the gear lever for the flap speeds. Oh yes, it's over there, isn't it? Of course it is. So flap limits 20, so you've got 200 knots for 5 degrees, 190 knots for 25 degrees, 175 knots for 30. I'd completely forgotten that was written there, you know. I mean, it becomes pretty obvious during descent anyway, and you can start to feed the flaps in You'll quite often see, if you've flown recently and you've taken notice, if you happen to be sat behind the wing, you'll notice them during descent using both the spoilers and maybe 1 degree of flap as they get into lower altitude to crow brake the aeroplane, because obviously the higher you can stay and the faster you can stay during a flight, the cheaper it is to operate the aeroplane, and quite often aeroplanes are trying to make up time as well. So the faster they can stay, they will, and that means they'll end up using the spoilers and maybe a small amount of flap on the way down. Typically it's usually just spoilers. But yeah, it's not unusual to see an aeroplane descend into an airport and use spoilers all the way. So Howard's asking how I am. I'm pretty tired actually. I was meaning to do this video earlier in the evening and things got away from me a little bit. I ended up reading and looking at other things. So something else that's worth pointing out then about operating the airplane, at the moment it's on vertical navigation mode, so it's making its own way up to 28,000 feet. When we get there, it will go to altitude hold mode automatically. But then we'll need to set the altitude to the altitude we wish to get to on descent. So we'll go and set it straight away for 3,000 feet, for example. Or actually no, the wiser thing to do is to go and look at the approach chart, or sorry, arrival chart I should say, and you can look at the restrictions on here. So it becomes interesting looking at this. So you've got above 3,000 feet. I always think these lines are drawn backwards, but that's just the way my brain works, I think. So that says above 3,000 feet. This one says below 10,000 feet. If you go and look at that in LittleNavMap, it actually draws it a little bit more meaningfully. So you can see it here, look. Below 10,000 at Boeing. Then 8,000 all the way around that arcing route. And it actually writes it in on the waypoints. So you've got below 10,000 at Boeing, and 8,000 all the way around the track, and then above 3,000 at Obinu, and above 2,500. So remember from when we looked at the step descent, you need to be coming in at about 2,500 when we come into that ILS beam, to come in from underneath the glide slope. So we fly level into it. I don't mean we're, you know, dipping underneath it. We just fly level into the glide slope at the appropriate altitude to do so. So typically you will try to have your airplane configured, fully configured, at the same time as you are joining the ILS. You won't rush through decelerating and getting into the right situation. You'll get it ready beforehand, so you'll be configured for landing very early. So we just heard the beep, which means we were within 1,000 feet of our target altitude. So you can see top of descent is coming in about 60 miles. So airplane is levelling out, it's just dipped the nose. You can see the vertical speed winding out, and you'll see the throttles pull back, or not. They're pulling back a little bit to stop it from accelerating. Now it's no longer climbing. Okay, so something else we might want to look up on the way is the barometric pressure at the destination. So we can pull up the information on Dublin and go for the weather, and it says it's 1018 hectopascals or 30.06 inches. So when we come back down through the transition altitude, oh, something else to look up, isn't it? So what's the transition altitude at Dublin? So it says it on the approach chart, typically, not on the arrival chart. So it's here, 5,000 feet. So when we come down through 5,000, which is after we make that last turn, on the way along here, we will go and tune in this barometric pressure into the altimeters. Okay, so while we're doing that, should we go and have a look at Volanta as well? See what it's showing. So it's showing our actual route. Where it's quite cool is it shows it in 3D. So we can actually see our departure from Stansted in 3 dimensions. And there's our climb out across the country, and there we are live. It updates about every 7 seconds or so, I think. And we've got Dublin out across the Irish Sea, obviously. If we recenter that. Obviously, if you want to see the GPS plot, you can. Well, not GPS, the satellite map, I mean. And it's extremely high resolution. It's very cool. We'll leave that running in the background. I think I've shown this on a video recently, actually. There's a new feature. So full disclosure, Orbex have given me a premium account at Volanta for a short time, so I could show people this stuff. You can create parties in Volanta, and then you can invite people into the party, and then whoever's in the party with you can use this extra panel that appears, so you can draw on the map. So say you were doing ATC or something, you could say, actually there's an exercise going on in Anglesey at the moment at RAF Valley, so can nobody cross, over this part of the map? This is out of bounds for the exercise. And the trick about that is that's 3D as well, and everyone in the party will be able to see that on the map in Volanta. It's quite clever, isn't it? I've actually said to the devs at Volanta, it would be really nice if we could draw circles and straight lines, and if we could put text on the map, that would be an absolute killer function, because then you could type notes that the party could see. So if you were doing an ATC session, you could have somebody doing the ATC and drawing on the map, and everyone in the session would be able to see it, and they could draw radius rings and vectors and all the rest of it. They'd be very cool. Okay, so we're coming up to top of descent, so we need to go and set the target altitude for our descent. So I'm going to take that down to 10,000, which was the first altitude on the arrival route. So notice I've been able to change that, and the airplane hasn't reacted yet. So one easy way of doing that will just be to cycle VNav, but it may well be when we go through top of descent it will do it itself. So we'll see if it reacts. If it doesn't, we'll just go and toggle VNav off and on. If we go to altitude hold, for example, it's going to hold altitude at the altitude we're at. But then if we go and re-engage VNav, I'm surprised it didn't go to altitude hold, to be honest. I thought it used to. So when we engage VNav, it will make its way down to the target altitude. And then obviously we can zoom out on this screen. Actually, it will come into view any moment, actually. And we'll see the green banana, and we can judge if we're going to get down in time. And quite often, I think on the 777, it even tells you on the primary flight display, it says you need to retard the airspeed more. You need to help the aeroplane. Notice when we went through about 25,000 feet, the indicated airspeed changed over from showing knots or indicated knots to Mach number. That will change back on its own on the way down. VNav's okay. I'm just reading the live stream comments of people saying, yeah, a lot of people have mixed experiences with VNav. So you're not alone. So you can still use level change, which will obviously bring you down probably much more quickly, I should say. But obviously it's going to disregard the parameters that were programmed in earlier on. So when we were looking at the init refs, this is showing approach refs now. But yeah, you could manipulate the data, and the VNav's obviously going to follow it in terms of the data that it predicts, you know, on the way down. Whereas level change, the aeroplane's just going to come down at the fastest rate it can, given the configuration it's in at the moment. And obviously vertical speed is there as well. The danger with vertical speed is it disregards the auto throttle. It will just do what you've commanded, regardless of if the aeroplane can maintain the speed that you've commanded. So you can end up either overspeeding the aircraft, or on a climb you could stall it. So, is it going to kick into vertical? Actually, no, we're in altitude hold, aren't we? So if I go VNav now, let's watch what happens. It shouldn't do it until we go through top of descent, because it doesn't need to. And even if we put this to a lower altitude, it will only get to 10,000 feet. Oh, actually, we could go for 8, couldn't we? If we command 8,000, that will go straight for that altitude, but it will hold at 10. There it goes. So yeah, it's done it at the right time. So having it switched on, it hasn't done it until it needed to. So it's estimating getting down to 8,000 feet, slightly ahead of Boeing, but it won't. Oh, actually no, it will this, because Boeing is saying below 10,000, which is fine. So altitude's winding off, speed's holding. We don't need to help it. So quite often with the bigger, heavier planes, you have to help them with a bit of spoiler on the way down, because they're so big and they have so much momentum that some of the depending on the wind, of course, as well. If the wind's behind you, you'll have to use spoilers to help the aeroplane reach the targets. But that, again, that comes down to having programmed the wind in, which I didn't. I think VNav does work. I'm just reading the live stream comments. Quite often when people say VNav doesn't work, it's because they've missed something, or they've not accounted for something. You can tell there's a target here, look, on the right hand side of the navigation display. It tells you if you're above or below the vertical navigation profile. So it's a bit like when you're flying ILS, but it's for the entire flight profile, if that makes sense. So that's what the autopilot's trying to reach. And if that marker is above or below, you know if you're above or below the planned flight profile. Okay, so we should see Ireland out in the distance. Yeah, we can. It's over there, look. So we're out over the Irish Sea now. Just left, that's Anglesey. There's the Menai Strait over there. There's the hills of Snowdonia. So anyone who's done the Mac loop, it's over there. Okay, so we just keep an eye on that navigation display. It's quite a circuitous arrival route, isn't it? It gives us some things to do though, which is good. Gets us to exercise a little bit of grey matter and keep the aeroplane on track. So let's go and have a look while we're descending at what we're going to be facing. So we're just coming in past Anglesey, as we said. And we have to be below 10,000 feet at Boeing. So let's pull up the arrival chart. Below 10,000 feet. Notice these are shown as flight levels. This is because they are above the transition altitude. Notice then, once they go below the transition altitude, they're shown in thousands of feet. So any altitudes above the transition altitude will always be shown as flight levels. But yeah, this is a real trip down memory lane for me. I haven't flown the Boeings for a long, or no, the 737s. Haven't flown them for a long time. It's surprising how quickly it comes back to you. Because for a long time the 737 was the only thing I flew, because I had X-Plane 11 back in the day that has the Zebo mod, which was the 737-800X. And that really taught me how 737s work. More so than the PMDG does, to be honest. It wasn't as automated. You had to go and calculate the numbers in the FMC. So you had to use a tablet to do a performance calculation. Which, you know, I haven't even come in here, have I? If I request the data from Simbrief, you can see there's our route, look. So if we go and zoom in slightly on that, if we go to Navigraph charting, it will look a bit prettier. I think we can stop this by doing that, yeah. So if we go in another step, will it show us more? Apparently not. I thought it might. Oh, it's because of the world map we're showing, that's why. So if I show IFR low, there we go. And we can look at the arrival weather here. There's a shortcut to do it in the aircraft. So we can see there's that QNH 1019. It's showing it as hectopascals though. So if you want to change this in the aircraft, you can. It's showing it in inches at the moment. If you look at the Barrow knob up there, you can switch between hectopascals and inches. Inches are actually more accurate because it's a finer gauge scale than hectopascals. So hectopascals is essentially a fancy name for millibars. So Christopher says on the live stream chat, and again this is good knowledge that I've missed because, you know, like I said, I'm extremely rusty with this. He says it's also important to reset the MCP altitude before your top of descent so the VNAV system engages properly and in time. If you don't, you'll have to help it to maintain the constraints, etc. Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. So you need to have your target altitude set before you run through top of descent if you're using VNAV. Okay, let's reduce the range on this so we can see the legs coming. So we're down to just coming towards 10,000 feet. So remember, as we come through 10,000 feet, we will have to get to 250 knots. So the aeroplane is decelerating as we speak. So it's surprising actually that, no, this is just creeping down then. It's doing it very gradually. It hasn't suddenly jumped to say 250 knots. So civil aviation aircraft aren't allowed to fly faster than 250 knots below 10,000 feet. That's why that's happening. Also, when we come through 10,000 feet, we'll have to go and turn the landing lights back on. Again, it's convention and aviation law. Civil aviation aircraft have their landing lights on below 10,000. So you can see we're still on profile on the little gauge there. So just double checking, we've got the course of the runway programmed in, we've got nav1 and nav2 programmed in. So something that's rather interesting, when you get onto the ILS, you can enable both autopilots at once in exactly the same way as you can in an Airbus. It's worth having a look at that actually. What class of ILS have we got at? Does it tell us on here? Let's see what information LittleNavMap gives us about it. Cat 3. So Cat 3 will allow zero visibility landings. That's all I was really interested in. I couldn't see it marked very clearly on the plate from Jeppesen. Okay, so landing lights need to come on now. We're below 250 knots now, so it's actually gone a little bit conservative here, yeah. It's speeding back up, it's coming up to 240 knots. But that may be a restriction that's programmed in. Yeah, that it's slowing down to 220 on the way round. And if we go and look at the chart again, is that a speed restriction? Yes, max 220 knots, look, all the way round. So the aeroplane's managing all of that wonderfully. So someone else has noticed, so yeah, Dylan noticed there's a Cat 3 chart down here, so there it is, yeah. Good shout, Dylan. Yeah, so you've got Cat 3 refer to minimums, blah 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 blah. 5,000 feet transition altitude. It's mostly the same data, but there might be different procedures around go-arounds and things like that. So typically I land the airplane myself, and I think I'm tempted to, because I hate using autoland. And half the fun is reminding yourself how the airplane behaves when you get into that low speed regimen. So it's worth reminding ourselves again, looking down here. So 5 degrees is at 200 knots, 25 at 190. I mean, it is marked on the indicated airspeed ribbon when you slow down anyway. Okay, so we can see the coast of Ireland now. If we go and have a look at the chart, that we're coming in, pointing almost towards the bay where there's a spit of land there. That's there then. So the airport's over here, but we're going to arc round. There we go. Let's keep an eye on the chart. So there's the runway. Oh, sorry, there's the runway, and that's the projected line. There is the vector towards the approach. So we're at 8,000 feet, 220 knots. We're on the money so far. So we're just following the standard route. So then we should be able to say we need to get to this altitude at, so 3,000 feet at lap mo. So we can go and set 3,000 feet. We're on VNAV, so it won't do it yet. It will wait till we've gone through that final altitude restriction. If we go and look at the arrival chart, it will wait till we come past DW816 and then start descending. So if we have a look down here, we can see that happening. So let's just go and quickly remind ourselves. We can cheat and press B for barometric pressure, which will give us the local. But it's always good fun to do it. So 30.09 if we stay in inches. Isn't it interesting though, looking at the flight deck of a 737 versus the more modern airliners? Even the more modern Boeings, they make this look quite antiquated, don't they? With the amount of switches and things, the amount of manual control or the manual input the pilots have during procedures in the 737. It's enormous. The workload's much more than modern aircraft. It'd be great to see an older aircraft like a 727 in the sim with all the dials. That'd be great fun. The Fokker F-28 is very, very good from Just Flight. It's great fun flying that. And the BAE 146 as well. See, there's another aeroplane I haven't flown for ages. Have to go and have another go in it. I always like flying it without the FMC and just using VOR navigation as it was in its era. Ah, so Christopher says the B727 is releasing next week. I didn't know that. I knew it was coming. I didn't realise how far away it was. I wonder if it's any good. That's the $1 million question, I guess. So we can see 816 is coming, and after that we descend and lose speed, I guess. Let's go and have a quick double check. So no, it's staying 220 knots almost until the end, so we don't slow down that early. So looking at the arrival chart, we'll be looking to get obviously to typical approach speeds, which will be sort of 160-ish. But they want us to stay at 220, max 220 knots. So we could slow down. As soon as we come around this corner, I'd be tempted to slow down. I mean, we could slow down now, and it will make the job easier later. But let's see what this has got programmed. So it's not going to get down to... It's not going to start really decelerating until MaxEV, which is on the approach. Okay, we'll leave it to it and let it do what it wants to do. And then once we've got everything stabilised on approach, we'll take over. See, we've got the gear up marker. If as soon as we're below that, we could put the gear out, and that will give us a huge amount of drag. So I'm just reading the live stream chat of Christopher saying that I'm going to go and get the 727. Well, of course. Aeroplane Heaven is also developing the Boeing 707 as a famous flyer. That would be cool, wouldn't it? But didn't it get delayed? I'm not sure the 707 has much in the way of systems to have depth. It's pretty mechanical, isn't it? Okay, let's bring that range in. So we can see DW816 is coming. Altitude at 8,000. But we don't have to stay at this speed if we don't want to, but I'm going to let VNav do what it wants. Because if we turn VNav off, we're going to have to manage the descent as well as the speed ourselves, which we could. All you need to do is reference the approach chart to know we just basically know we need to get to 2500 by MaxEV, don't we? I guess I could just for the illustration of how to do that. So yeah, should we take over now? Once we get through DW816, I'll take it out of VNav and we'll take over. So we'll go altitude hold to begin with. Right, so altitude hold. So we can now control speed ourselves. And we're going to go vertical speed mode. So we'll see the green banana, remember. We're going to use spoilers to help the aeroplane decelerate. As well as go downhill. So this just gives us a bit more fun to play with the aeroplane. So we probably need to come down a bit more steeply. It's interesting, we can already see the glide slope, which is amazing, but we're quite a way out still. So we're now slow enough to put out. Notice it's saying up here we can't achieve 180 knots because we don't have the configuration for it. So I'm doing that now. Start to put the flaps out. We can also put the gear out, which will give us some drag. We can get rid of the spoilers now. What was the 3009? So let's... It still doesn't like getting down to that sort of speed. Should we just put it up to 185? So notice this is what I was saying about earlier. The bigger the 737 gets, the narrower this gap gets between the maximum and the minimum speed for the configuration. It's a so-and-so, it really is. It's more challenging the bigger the jet gets because of it. So you can see the green banana. We're not quite coming down fast enough, so we're going to put the spoilers out a bit to help it. So what flap do we've got 10 degrees flap at the moment. We're almost there on the vertical speed. Sorry, the indicated airspeed. Okay, so we've come through 5,000 feet. We need to come back out of standard barometric pressure and go for 30,009. Done. Does it do this one as well? Yeah, it does. Okay, I better get my desk organised, get the throttle and everything in place. Okay. If you're wondering about the weird view, I've sat up in the cockpit so we could see more earlier in the approach. We're about to make a left turn. If we go and look out sideways, we'll be able to see the runway in a moment. So I've got it ready way in advance, so we're not in a hurry to do anything. So 160 knots commanded, 3,000 feet now. So that's the minimum altitude we can be. You can see the glide slope is coming towards us. We've still got lateral navigation on, so the aircraft's still steering to follow the flight plan on its own. And there's the runway right out in front of us. So you can see there's the glide slope coming down slowly. If we want to use approach mode, we would have to do it now before we cross through the glide slope. So let's just show you that. I'm going to disengage it and fly it myself anyway, but we'll put approach mode on. And when you've got approach mode on and nav1 and nav2 are both tuned into the ILS, you can use both autopilots at once. And it will go to glide slope mode there, look, it's just capturing it. And you'll see the vertical speed dip off any moment. As soon as that hits the middle, there it goes. The airplane is now descending on the glide slope all on its own. So, at this point, I'm going to turn off the auto throttle and stop the alarm for it. Turn off the autopilot, stop the alarm. And I'll fly it in.
2,500.
So I've just gone to full flaps. So I'm just wondering if that's going to impact our amount of lift we've got. But look how narrow that gap is on the indicated airspeed ribbon between the maximum and the minimum speeds. I'm trying to get giving the airplane a bit of a wiggle to get a feel for it. So gear is down, flaps are down, lights are on, barometric pressure's done. We're pretty much ready. So all I'm doing now is following the instruments. So we're going off to the left slightly. We've got a headwind of 11 knots. So we'll just correct that and bring the airplane back across. I think it might be slightly offset, you know. So this is why it pays to have the airplane configured way in advance, because then you don't have a sudden rush. We've even got time to have a look outside, even on manual control. So you can hear the outer marker there. Oh, so yes, the outer marker says OM is flashing in the corner of the PFD. So just small corrections to bring it into the middle of the localizer and to keep on the glide slope. Should be able to see the puppy lights soon. They're just about resolving on the resolution of the screen. So as soon as we touch the runway, we'll go full spoilers and reverse thrust until we get to about 70 knots, 80 knots, and then go to wheel brakes after that and release the reverse thrust. Whoa, there's scenery loading in on the ground, and you're hearing TCAS. We should have really turned TCAS to TA. We got a fuel warning. Excellent, that'll be the centre tankers depleted. So we really should go and turn off the pumps for the centre tank, but we're a bit busy at the moment. So we're a bit low, and you can see that is agreeing between the puppy lights and the glide slope on the primary flight display.
400.
So we're going low again. Again, this is just practice of not knowing the aeroplane.
300.
We're a bit on the slow side as well. There's the
200.
marker.
100. 50. 30. 20. 10.
Okay, so spoilers out. Reversers. Are the reversers going to work? They're kind of working, but not very much. So I'm going to go for wheel brakes. And we've got a high-speed exit coming, so there we go. So we'll just roll for the high-speed exit now. So spoilers off, flaps up. Wait until we get off the runway before we do anything about the I didn't use the I should have really gone and switched on auto brakes as well, but we didn't really need it. Yeah, you don't turn off the lights until you get off the runway. Been told off for doing that before. And the strobes go back to steady instead of... So position lights, I should say. Steady instead of strobing. And we just taxi back. So taxi light is still on. I didn't turn the taxi light off earlier, did I? That's bad. That's one for me to correct next time. Let's put the head tracking back on. So on the taxi back, it's quite common to go and put the APU on in case you don't have ground power. So if you remember as well, we had the fuel warning light come on. That'll be the centre. You got low pressure there, look, so we've run out of fuel on the centre tanks basically. I'm trying to steer and look around unsuccessfully. So we'll go and put the APU back on. So we'll start it. And then obviously the blue light on the bus transfer will come back on when it's ready. But that will mean we'll be able to shut down the main engines. Oh, here comes a Ryanair behind us. That means we'll be able to shut down the main engines without losing power to the aircraft if we've bus transferred over to APU before we do it. So if we're out on a stand, for example. Apparently you're not supposed to turn through that taxiway. Oh, that's a shame. Okay, I haven't actually looked at a diagram of the airfield, so I have no idea where I'm going. Not allowed up that one either, so we just have to follow it around, I guess. So someone's asking, do I have my checklists printed out? I actually have a second screen. It isn't on this computer though. I've got a Raspberry Pi with a screen alongside on the desk, and I load up the Google Docs originals of the checklists that I've written up over there. But yeah, for actually in-flight operations, I don't have checklists for that. I really should. So in the real world, they have checklists for the various different phases of flight. You know, for descent, approach, and all the rest of it, and they work through them. But again, you need two pilots to do that, really. So should we just pull in over here? You'll see the blue light has come on there for the APU, so we can switch over to it. Parking brake on. Taxi lights off. And then we can, I'm going to turn the head tracking off to do this, so we can do it neatly and accurately. So we bus transfer to the APU. We're no longer using the engines to generate electricity, so we can shut the engines down. So you can see the RPM will fall off a cliff. And we can just work around the aeroplane turning things off. So probe heats can come off. Window heats can come off, the yaw damper can come off. Back further overhead, we can go and turn off the inertial navigation system. The packs can come off. The lights can come off now. And yeah, the final few things you're going to do is obviously go and turn off the fuel pumps, but we'll leave that one on for the APU to use. I seem to remember the reason it uses aft one is because it's at the lowest point of the tank, of the fuel tank. Therefore, it is the most, it can get the last bit of fuel that the APU can use. That may be wrong, but I seem to remember reading that. Obviously, once you've finished doing all of that, you can just go and turn the APU off. And then you're going to finally go and disarm the emergency lights and turn the batteries off, and you're back to cold and dark. So basically do everything in reverse order. Obviously, if you're going to simulate passenger operations, you don't do that as quickly as that. And the other fun thing you can do now is go and look at Volanta, and we can review our flight. And it shows you the whole flight. And if we go and zoom in over here, you can see the touchdown point, and we can see 300 feet a minute, 116 knots. So it's quite a heavy landing, but not too bad. Not considering I haven't flown the 737 for a while. But yeah, there you go. Hopefully you enjoyed that. So we worked through just about everything. The shortcut checklist that I've written up for myself is in the notes of this video. So you're welcome to go and grab a copy of that from Ko-fi. And we covered all sorts of stuff there. So the person that asked me to do this video really asked me to do some of the manual bits, which is why I really went after doing an ILS manual landing instead of letting the airplane land itself. And also they wanted me to program a route, which is why I didn't do Airways. I just wanted to keep it simple and show how you can put a route together and then how you can program that into the aeroplane. So hopefully I showed that and explained everything I was doing along the way and some of the pitfalls. So you saw, for example, the sim paused early on. There was a glitch and it ended up with a couple of the levers. The speed brake was in the wrong place and the gear lever had gone to the wrong place. So it was just to point those sort of things out that they can happen. Anyway, hopefully you all enjoyed that and I'll see you all again soon. So thank you very much for watching if you've been watching along. And it's actually been suggested to me that I do this same flight or a similar flight in lots of different aeroplanes to show the same configuration in different flight decks. So I'm thinking about it. It might be quite a good one because that is quite an interesting arrival route into Dublin, isn't it? So there's lots to fiddle with and do on the way in. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks again. See you soon.